All right, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions. And today's topic is on leadership as a capacity building practice. So I'd like to introduce our guest today, Dr. Cio. So if you'd like to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Dr. Cio Hernandez, and I build leaders from wherever they are, whether you're having to lead yourself up off the floor, out of your bed, or into a leadership position in a large organization or company.
All
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, David.
right, you're welcome. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into our question about today's topic. So I know you frame leadership as something that builds capacity rather than just drives outcomes. So how do you define capacity building in leaders, and why is it especially critical in high pressure, high stakes roles today?
Okay, so I'm going to take that a chunk at a time. So I see three parts of leadership. So there's the transactional part where you're doing what you need to do to become a leader, getting your degrees, checking off certifications, talking to people who've already done it, right? You're doing things. Then there's this becoming phase where it moves from the transactional part to the transformational part. And it's an interesting, almost like a sleeping bear, where you're kind of coming to figure out that, oh, yeah, I actually have been a leader all along, but don't really know what to do with that. And other people have not necessarily given you the beliefs for you to internalize for yourself that either I was already a leader or I have been becoming a leader in the way that I would love to see myself be able to be. And then the third part is that transcendence part. And you just know I was always a leader. I've always been making leadership decisions. And then you just be the leader you were born to be. And you just step into it with the suit that just feels right because it was always you. And the second part was of your question was about why we need to be building the capacity. Is that right?
Yeah, why was it especially critical in high pressure, high stakes roles?
If you're not willing to look up to the highest place in your leadership post, it's going to be very, very difficult to help lead a team, lead out of a crisis, lead anything, including yourself. So you have to be willing to increase your own capacity to zoom up, look down at what you got, and then figure out what you need to do, what you need to become for the situation, and how you're going to transcend the whole group, including yourself, into a different leveled up place. And if you're not doing that, you're not really leading effectively.
All right, no, I appreciate that. I would call that a very gold answer. One of my groups, we do a lot of, personal business development, and to me, this fits right in with all the stuff that we look at week after week. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I've been building leaders forever. That's just who I am. I was never an actual cheerleader, but everybody calls me a cheerleader. So I never wore a skirt or pom-poms or anything like that, but I can cheerlead anybody into being able to see themselves eventually and see themselves come out. So, it started many years ago. I was leading a sexual abuse group and I didn't want to call it that. So I called it a leadership group. And it was amazing what the youth in that group were able to do once they saw themselves as leaders, not as victims. And if you take that same dynamic and put it in a corporate setting, a lot of companies focus on the bottom line. When you're only focused on the bottom line, what you do is you tend to create an entire workforce of 10-year-old children who believe that I'm not good enough, because that's the developmental stage of basically of productivity, really, if you're looking at it, right? When we have that kind of a workforce that is triggered into these younger ego states, it's really the role of the leader to be able to zoom up and go, oh, I see what I got here. I need to help my workforce understand and believe that I know that they are good enough, and help believe in them until they believe in themselves. And then that's not just good for productivity. That's good for our co-regulation. That's good for our workforce. That's good for retention. That's good for customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. And ultimately, it's really what you want your businesses to be thriving and wanting to be that workforce that they want to be a part of. They belong. It's a culture of safety and belonging.
No, it truly is, and I do appreciate that. So, from the perspective of leadership, I know you've been saying you've been leading groups and helping people, but I know you also run your own business too. So, how does That have you applied that to helping to grow and develop your business? And can you give, the audience some more insight into what you actually do there?
So I run 4 businesses. So I have my private practice that I've led for decades as a mental health practitioner as part of Hernandez Family Therapy. I also do coaching and helping people get across their licensing exams through that realm to help people be able to see themselves as the leaders they were already are. But sometimes getting to the other side of that test day mastery, which is one of our courses that we're building now, comes with believing that you're good enough to be able to step into that leadership role for yourself. So leveling up is a work in progress. It's an inside outside job forward, built on a theory of adaptive information processing, that your brain has the capacity to make a new relationship to old material that isn't serving us anymore and is getting in the way of us having the future that we desire. So we work in the past, the present, and the future all at the same time to build leadership there. The other product within Got This is a provider platform that's about to launch, coming up already in the next few months. And this will help coaches and clinicians and trainers and corporations and leaders be able to help lead the people that they're wanting to help accelerate their leadership and being able to do those steps for themselves and also as part of a group. And so that has worked really great with all of the clients that I have used it with over the last several years in our old version. Our new version is about to launch, and that's super exciting to be able to see where it's going to go next. But I've used it with everybody from elite athletes to professionals who are leading up, executives, and others that are just wanting to make a new relationship to themselves. But I also started the Be It Foundation in South Texas, and we serve from San Antonio down to the border. And I run this foundation from California, but it's serving South Texas, which is where my family is from. And we have been able to really transform what mental health looks like in South Texas in just 4 short years. And that's by building leaders who were already knowingly or unknowingly leading, building their capacity to serve both individuals all the way up to policy change, and using public health principles and socioecological principles and other community-based learning to be able to support them into their leadership. So basically, I'll help you level up from wherever you are as long as you're willing.
What are some patterns that you most often see, when there's stress, confidence, and unresolved experiences that start impacting people's performance and decision making?
It almost always goes back to something that happened earlier in life. And it might be pre-verbal. Well, if you think about the earliest times, a trigger now that takes you into that, when you get that pressured place, might take you all the way back to trust versus mistrust when you were a tiny baby. Or when you're a little bit older along the developmental stages of Ericksonian stages, where you're looking to try to be autonomous, but really the shame and doubt wins. So when you get pressure, you go to shame and doubt instead of going, oh yeah, I am autonomous. I am free to be me. Or it might be a little bit older in initiative versus guilt, where somebody starts to believe that the pressure means I'm responsible for everyone and everything, which is usually something that happens to 4-year-olds that are in systems when maybe somebody died or they had a change in their life or they moved or a sibling was born. And all of a sudden there's an increased belief in the child that everyone and everything is their responsibility. Or a little older, as we were talking about in industry, right? Like just trying to be able to be the industrious child and not letting yourself fall into the place of believing I'm not good enough. And again, we sometimes intentionally in systems create entire systems of triggering people back into that younger ego state of believing that they're not good enough. But as we go older into our stages, so past industry versus inferiority, we get into the adolescent stages and start to believe that we don't fit in, which is actually the opposite of we don't belong. Trying to understand realistically that the only place we ever really need to belong is in ourselves. And if we belong in ourselves, then we can connect much more easily to people. And that is really a foundation of a good workforce, right? Or any kind of team. You want to know that you belong. So I say the difference between belonging and fitting in, because fitting in is about other people and a belonging is really the true value of yourself, right? Creating that core self. Then as you get older into intimacy versus isolation. I'm worthy of that connection. So that pressure sometimes triggers these younger ego states to even believing that maybe I don't deserve to be connected. I'm not lovable. And then later on, kind of the juicy ages for communities that are thriving are in generativity versus stagnation. So in those ages of the 30s and the 40s and the years that we're working, making money, having babies, and we're productive, right? Productive or reproductive. Where if we're not focusing on people's well-being at the same time that we're asking them to be generative, we're not actually producing generative people. We are only focusing on that productivity, and we're missing the part of the essence of their being and allowing them to transcend into their highest and best selves. And then as we get older and move more into integrity versus despair, we're really looking at, okay, how do we keep going when grief and loss continues to win, right? We start in our older ages in a workforce that is starting to see the trajectory of its life. It looks just like the neurodevelopmental stages as well. And so we need to be able to maintain the integrity of the organization, the relationships, when the pressure is on in the midst of grief and loss in other areas. It might be might have lost funding, you might have lost a big client, you might have lost a leader that was very well regarded, or a teammate or somebody else. We have to understand that the life cycle of an organization is the same as the life cycle of a human, and start to think about how pressure influences that for our leadership potential.
No, I really appreciate that insight. I know many people will find that very helpful in their understanding. At least those that I've interacted with, I know really appreciate these kind of insights.
Well, I love working with organizations and companies on helping them understand the Ericksonian stages of their workforce, because people are like, wait, what? I'm part of the problem? Well, yes, maybe, but you're also part of the solution, and being able to level up and see with kindness and integrity what we have, and be able to work towards systems change from a much better vantage point that's much more sustainable than continuing to push people when they're at their end of their energy, and really when they start to move into what we call dorsal vagal shutdown. They get tired of running and fighting, that they just start to shut down unless we can help them come back into safety and connection for themselves. And then that's going to be better for all of us.
What do you personally enjoy most about your role and all that you do today? Whether that's working with the leaders, building your technology, or seeing the real world transformation happen through your work.
I love seeing the ripple effects of people leveling up, finding themselves, flying. And then I get to just hold in my heart that, wow, they did it. And that makes me feel not just honored to be a part of that journey, but to know, look, that person's leadership is transforming so many rippling effects that we'll never be able to measure in its entirety. So the drip of belief in somebody else is the gold.
Well, thank you.
It doesn't matter if they never give you any credit for it. That's not why we're doing what we're doing.
You mentioned some new things. So, in terms of upcoming initiatives, what would you say is the most important initiative or priority that you're currently focused on right now? Again, whether that's product development, partnerships, research, or expanding your impact.
Oh gosh, it's all everything everywhere all at once is one of my pitch decks that I use to help people understand you can't just do one thing. In this space of leadership, we have to be leveling up all systems at the same time, and being able to recognize that all of the different orbitals are seriously up leveling at the same time. So the test day mastery is one thing that we're getting out soon. And that's just helping people who are about to take a test, whether they're in college or taking a licensing exam or grad school or about to submit their dissertation. It just helps them make a new relationship with their own internal operating system, right? To be able to see themselves already being who they've been transactionally taking steps to be. Um, the two most exciting from the app perspective are launching the provider portal. The leadership accelerator is part of the app. So those two are pretty exciting, and I'm hoping that people will be willing to test out that this app and then also the Leadership Accelerator portal. Because those, I believe, are going to be really amazing tools to be able to help leaders at any level be able to take groups along with them. And then lastly, the work that I've been doing in South Texas is in a pivotal transformational point, which is kind of funny since it's a leadership accelerator already, right? Like we've taken 50 leaders from South Texas and said, okay, we're going to build you up to your next level. And these are people who are already paying it forward in South Texas. So now what we're going to be doing is learning from the Uvalde community and areas of South Texas who have already survived emergencies. We're going to learn from them, create a trauma response network of South Texas, create the policies that are necessary for mental health for South Texas to be able to respond with more agility and more power to create the leadership to be able to help the community come back after an emergency. And then to be able to publish those outcomes, because a lot of times people lead quietly when realistically leaders need to be telling their stories so that other people can learn how to lead more effectively. So we're going to be leading them through their own transformational process of being the ones that people turn to in South Texas. And hopefully that'll have rippling effects nationally and internationally as well. We've created a separate organization called Levelation International, which builds on our work from South Texas. The funds from South Texas's Viet Foundation can only be used in South Texas. We want to be able to show that we can replicate the success of what we did there and show that everybody can be a part of resilience and leadership.
No, it sounds great. I'm actually kind of excited to see, this next chapter, let's call it, how it's going to come because it does sound like it's very interesting. And one thing I always like to ask people, because I know right now we are talking with a lot of folks who are involved kind of in the healthcare space and related or adjacent fields and protected.
Gosh. Okay. So that is a huge question on multiple levels, right? If we're talking just the app, our data and privacy and security policies, that is my most important thing because I taught law and ethics for, gosh, over 20 years. And confidentiality is the big C that wraps around everything that I've ever done as a clinician. So I want to make sure people know that I hold that value true for their data that comes in the cyber world as well. So obviously having cybersecurity and other securities in place to make sure that we're not just HIPAA compliant and protecting their data, but that we know the most important thing that we have is people's protected health information. And mental health data is really the most vulnerable when you learn what's really happening in people's minds, right? So we do offer people's ability to look at their own data. And then we have corporate data that is aggregated. So there is nothing that goes to an individual. But sometimes understanding where a large data set is believing can be helpful for transformation too. So there's the both and. We want to be able to hold that we are protecting people's privacy and their data from an individual level. So that granular information is something that we're protecting. But we're also learning from what we are seeing as far as trends go. So that's true when we take that information to a community level perspective. Like I was saying earlier, if your entire workforce if you're getting 100 people that are saying their negative belief about themselves is I'm not good enough, that tells you something about your workforce that you as a leader better do something about. I'm trying to see how this is landing with you because if we have an opportunity here to take the information from that data, then we also have an opportunity to change what this anxious generation, this newest generation in the workforce is to be able to understand that they were always good enough. And if we can transform that, that's where our power as leaders go in organizations that will have access to this kind of information. But I'm also open to having you push back on me.
We all are in this space where we are dealing with probably people's most critical information. So we want to make sure that we're all doing our due diligence to protect that. And that's why I love to ask that question because when people hear what others are doing with their data, I'm hoping it's giving them a peace of mind that, okay, great, they're doing what they need to do. And I love what they're doing. So I might want to reach out and participate or use the app or the service or whatever it may be. But if someone's not, it's like, I would love to help them to make sure they've got that squared away. So they can do what they want to do and reach the people that need their help.
Amazing. I would love to borrow your brain a little bit more on that.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, then I know we've covered quite a bit and we are kind of approaching the end of our time here. So just want to see if there's any final last thoughts you'd like to leave the audience today.
The biggest thing is two things, actually. Go believe in somebody until they believe in themselves, and it will be the greatest gift of your lifetime. And then be willing to lead. Just be. Be it. Be who you were supposed to be and know that you got this already.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everything you shared today and the amazing insights that you brought. For anyone who would like to know more, we will have all the information in the description below this video. So, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, David. It was great to be with you and to be on your program.